A reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now, draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Will you join me in prayer? God, help us to hear you, to know you, to feel you. Help us to have an experience with you today, God. Amen. Well, who doesn't love weddings? All right, let's just for a moment imagine a bride at her wedding. She's standing in the back of this room just moments before the ceremony begins, and her dress is flawless and the flowers are stunning. The guests are seated and smiling, but behind her smile is this growing panic. She's just been told that the caterer is running late, and she's just been told that the champagne for the toast hasn't arrived, and she's just been told that her friend who is going to do the service hasn't shown up. Maybe she should have asked that UCC minister to do the wedding instead. Suddenly, the joy of this day feels fragile to her, right? As if just one more small crisis could shatter the whole celebration. And that tension, that feeling of anxiety about what could go wrong, it's something that I think many of us can relate to. Maybe it's not at a wedding, but maybe in moments when our plans are unraveling or when we're faced with uncertainties that make us question whether things will turn out okay. Right? We feel that. What if we aren't ready for the challenges ahead? What if the things we depend on falter? What if there isn't enough, right? Enough resources, enough time, and enough of us to meet the needs around us? We are standing at the threshold of this new year, and I imagine for many of us, we carry some of that anxiety with us. Tomorrow we observe Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a time when we honor a man who faced immense resistance and fear with unshakable faith and transformative action. And Dr. King once said, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase." That kind of trust is what allowed him to confront injustice, even when the way forward was unclear. And at the same time, tomorrow marks another moment in our nation's story, the inauguration of a new president. And for some, this transition brings hope. And for others, it brings deep uncertainty and concern. And in both cases, it highlights how anxious and divided our world feels right now. And so how do we as a people of faith navigate the fear and unknowns of such a pivotal moment? It's with these two starkly different moments happening tomorrow in our minds that we look this morning at the story of the wedding at Cana in John chapter 2. And at first glance, this seems like an ordinary wedding, a time of celebration and joy. But beneath the surface, there is a growing anxiety because the wine has run out. And for a first century Judean wedding, this wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a significant social embarrassment, a failure of hospitality that could overshadow the whole celebration. And the hosts must have felt the weight of that moment, the worry about what people might think, the fear of letting their guests down. But as usual, a mom comes to the rescue. Mary notices the problem and brings it to Jesus. And there's this quiet desperation in her request, but she trusts that certainly Jesus can do something. She doesn't know how he will respond, but she knows that he will, because that's what her little boy does. And even though Jesus initially resists, he acts. He transforms water into wine. And not just any wine, but the finest wine. And not just enough, but in abundance. Gallons and gallons and gallons of wine. This wedding is going to be off the hook. This is a story. It's a story about much more than just this miracle. It's about a shift from anxiety to trust, from worry to wonder. You see, Mary's trust in Jesus opens a door for transformation. The servant's simple act of obedience, filling jugs with water, becomes a step towards something extraordinary. And in the end, the anxiety of the moment gives way to celebration as Jesus reveals not just a miraculous power, but grace. In our own lives, we often find ourselves standing in this moment of anxiety. We see the gaps. We see gaps in our resources, uncertainty in our plans. We wonder if there will be enough strength, enough hope, enough of God's presence to carry us through. The wedding at Cana reminds us that Jesus meets us in these moments, not with judgment or reprimand, but with grace. He takes what we have, even if it seems small or insignificant, and uses it to reveal something greater. His grace turns our fear into faith and our anxiety into assurance. As a progressive, justice-minded church, this theme resonates deeply for us, I feel. The anxiety of our times is real. We see it in the systems of injustice that perpetuate inequality and harm. We feel it in the face of climate change and political division and global uncertainty. We wonder how we have gotten ourselves into this mess, into this divisive and hate-filled moment on our world's stage. We are tempted, I know I am tempted, to put our head in the sand, to turn off the news, maybe grab one of those jugs of wine and just forget. But the call of this story is not to ignore those anxieties or pretend that they don't exist. Instead, it is to bring them to God, trusting that even in our fear, God is present and active. It's to step forward in faith, to know that even when the way ahead is unclear, God can transform our small acts of love and service into something extraordinary. And so this shift from anxiety to trust is not just about how we feel, it's about how we act. Like Mary, we are called to notice the needs around us and bring them to God. Like the servants, we're called to take the small, faithful steps we can, even if we don't yet see how they will make a difference. And like the disciples, we are invited to see in these moments a glimpse of God's glory, a reminder that God's grace is always more than enough. As we step into this new year and this new administration, let us carry this story and its lessons with us. Let's acknowledge the anxieties that we feel, but let's not be defined by them. Instead, let us bring them to God, trusting that God is with us, working through us, transforming even our smallest efforts into acts of grace. Let's honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by walking in faith, believing that justice and peace are possible, even when the path ahead is uncertain. And let us move into this moment in our nation's life with hope, knowing that God's grace is sufficient for all that lies ahead. And so here's the invitation. Lean in. Lean in to the trust that God's grace is here with us now for all of us. And with this grace on hand, may we find the courage to act boldly, the faith to hope audaciously, and the joy to celebrate the ways that God's love is revealed in our midst. I believe that that is what we are being called to do in this moment. It's what our cultural, political, and spiritual lives ask of us right now. And here's what I think, right? I think this way of living, this way of being in the world, I truly believe that it changes our world. It certainly changed the lives of those gathered with Jesus in Cana. When we can go from worry to wonder, incredible things can happen for ourselves and for our community. So maybe 2025 is a time for you to lean in, to open up, to take a risk. Even in these moments when it's tough, even when it's scary, even when we might want to give up or shut down, even when things seem uncertain. May this way of living and leaning and trusting stay with us, both tomorrow and for the rest of the year. And not just for the sake of the whole world, but for each of us, each one of us. Let love and transformation come. Amen.